Terror alert as police investigating a suspect package left on a London tube train now find a device in Devon. Good evening. 2 days ago, police blew up a suspicious package on a Jubilee Line tube train. Today, they found another device 200 miles away at an address in Newton Abbot. Dozens of people were told to evacuate their homes. A 19-year-old suspect arrested yesterday in London is still in custody. Also tonight, protests at Downing Street calling for action to stop the killing in Syria as a leaked UN report accuses President Assad of again using chemical weapons. The Iraqi army, advancing on the Islamic State stronghold of Mosul, says it's now retaken 30 villages on the outskirts. And England's cricketers take control of the first test in Bangladesh.
Strong sweep. Does he get enough of it? He does.
A 200-metre cordon has just been lifted in Newton Abbot and Devon after a suspicious device was found at a property in the town. It was discovered by a Scotland Yard counter-terrorism team who've been investigating the package found at a London tube station just 2 days earlier. A teenager was detained in North London last night and is now being held in custody. Our senior Home Affairs correspondent Simon Israel reports.
The terror investigation today moved to Devon and to a street in the town of Newton Abbot. The area around an address on Tudor Road was evacuated. A reception centre was set up to house those residents. The Metropolitan Police said they had found an item similar to the one detonated at North Greenwich Underground Station. But this one, they said, was not viable. It follows yesterday's arrest of a suspected lone wolf. The unnamed 19-year-old student was seized on a busy North London high street in an armed police operation. Police say a taser was discharged, and since then he's been in custody, held under terrorism laws. It's reported his mental health condition is also being assessed. The suspicious item detonated at the tube station was more than just a bag of wires, but there is no verdict yet on whether it was a viable explosive device. But the mere fact it had been placed on a tube train has raised security concerns yet again and questions of safety on London's transport systems. One rail union claims permanent monitoring of the 10,000 CCTV cameras on the Underground has been downgraded.
What needs to happen is that we need to call urgently a safety summit in London Underground. I think that will be the first step towards having a better understanding of what happened at Greenwich, but more importantly, putting in place structures to ensure that we minimise future risks to both passengers and our members who keep London Underground going.
London Transport insists there's regular monitoring of CCTV, regular security checks and an extensive police presence. Channel 4 News has learned the Mayor Sadiq Khan's major review of security and safety across all of the capital's transport systems will be published next week. But for now, all attention is focused 200 miles away, where a bomb disposal team was helicoptered in to deal with a terror alert in the heart of Devon.
A report prepared for the UN Security Council has accused Syria of using chemical weapons for the third time. The leaked report says President Assad dropped barrel bombs with chlorine gas on Idlib last year. The Foreign Secretary here, Boris Johnson, said it was horrific and cruel barbarity. Protesters outside Downing Street today called on the government to do more to stop the Syrian and Russian bombing, saying too many children have been killed and orphaned. Simeon Brown reports.
Al-Sukhari in eastern Aleppo has a moment to catch its breath. It's the third day that the Syrian government and their Russian allies have suspended airstrikes, they say, to allow civilians in need to get help and give the rebels a free pass to leave. They've called it a humanitarian pause. But there's no pause in fighting here from these anti-Assad forces refusing to give up their ground. Eastern Aleppo has seen some of the worst violence of the war, but today focus turned to the city of Idlib. In March last year, up to 70 people were brought to this hospital, following a poisonous chlorine attack that left them struggling to breathe. The gas kills by burning your lungs. A new independent report to the UN has confirmed that Syrian government forces are responsible. It's the third time they've been found guilty, despite President Assad signing up to the convention that bans chlorine chemical weapons and pledging to destroy them in 2013. Chemical weapons and cluster bombs have been a big feature of Syria's war. The charity Save the Children has found that in 8 months, the number of attacks by cluster bombs has increased by 8-fold, with children paying the highest price. Over 130 children have been recorded dead in Aleppo over the past month, each life remembered here by a teddy outside Downing Street.
Down, child killer!
These protesters want Theresa May to do more. But if it's the Russians who are behind the airstrikes, are they directing their calls at the right world leader?
Why is this protest taking place outside Downing Street? Should it not be happening outside the Russian embassy?
Well, I mean, we see a bloodbath is unfolding in Aleppo, and the British government and many governments around the world simply aren't doing anything about it. We know that the Russians aren't going to respond to protests, but the British government might.
I'd like them to consider judicious and careful use of military strikes if that could provide a disincentive for any further abuse of human rights and international law. And I would like our government to work with NGOs and others to get humanitarian aid to people in the region.
So far, Syrians have been failed by global diplomacy, which appears to be breaking down. Today, the Foreign Office condemned President Assad and Russia. The Russians said they wanted to liberate Syria. These humanitarians ask why this is at the expense of Syria's children.
Well, I went down to today's protest and spoke to the actor Carey Mulligan, who's an ambassador for the charity War Child. And I asked her what had shocked her about watching the news from Aleppo.
With the frequency of what we're seeing, the frequency of the images that are coming out, and I mean, they're horrifying to see, and I think we've all been struck by them. And the image of Omran, that little boy Omran, sitting in the back of the ambulance, and I think what really struck me about that was that he was rescued, he was pulled out of the rubble. But there seemed to be a sort of metaphor for how we're dealing with this, that we're just about managing to rescue and that's it. And we just need to be doing so much more for these children.
So what do you want to do?
We're here today to ask our government to take a stronger stance. And we feel encouraged by what's happened this week and what Boris Johnson and Theresa May have been talking about. But we want to encourage, we think we can lead, the UK can lead in this. And we really want to encourage that to happen more.
What do you think they could do? When you say you're encouraged by what they're saying, do you mean the condemnation of Russia? Or? Yeah,
I mean, this week Boris Johnson said that nothing is off the table in what our response could be, and Theresa May has talked about the sickening atrocities in Aleppo and that all the options are open. And I think it's really time for us to dig in and lead from the front.
And I mean, the options they're looking at are things like sanctions, but there are also sort of no bombing zones and no fly zones, which carry inherent risks of military escalation. How do you feel about going to war over Syria?
Look, I'm not a military strategist, that isn't my position. I'm an advocate for a child protection charity, and I think there are lots and lots of diplomatic options to explore, and I think we can be very strong in that.
You once said the way we were treating refugees, and I know you've been to refugee camps, made you ashamed to be British, and I just wondered what you meant by that.
Well, in that interview, I mean, right before I did that interview, I read of a 15-year-old Afghan boy that had fallen off a lorry and died attempting to get into the UK, and he had a legal right to be in the UK. And so it was an emotive statement made in particular to our inaction in dealing with unaccompanied children in Calais. It wasn't a statement about how I feel about this country. I'm very proud to be British, and it's worth remembering that we are one of the biggest donor countries to the region in terms of humanitarian aid. I feel like this week I've been really encouraged by seeing amazing images of people standing holding banners saying welcome refugees, and we are now beginning to deal with those unaccompanied children and children that we have a legal obligation to help who are now coming over from Calais.
And do you think we should do more on that front?
I think we can move faster, I think we can work on the ground. Reports that I've heard from NGOs down and volunteers on the ground in Calais is that there could be more integration with the people who've been on the ground with the children for the last year and who have personal relationships, and we can really try and identify the vulnerable unaccompanied minors quickly before the camp's destroyed on Monday.
Kerry Mulligan, who was at the demonstration at Downing Street. Now, in Iraq, government and Kurdish forces are now 3 miles from the city of Mosul, the last stronghold held by Islamic State militants there. Despite a counterattack by IS militants in Kirkuk, government forces claim they've captured 30 villages around Mosul. The whereabouts of the IS leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, is unknown, but Kurdish officials say he was reportedly inside Mosul 3 days ago. One person is reported dead and almost 1,000 people are being treated for breathing problems after jihadists set fire to a sulphur plant just outside the city. Well, our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Jonathan Rugman, is in Erbil. So how is the Mosul offensive going?
I think the phrase I would use, Krish, is heavy going. Yes, 30 or so villages have been captured, but there have been suicide bombers, booby traps, snipers. We've seen pictures today of triumphant Iraqi forces moving into one of these liberated villages. But behind the scenes, there are recriminations within this coalition which is trying to expel ISIS. For example, in the city of Kirkuk, where 35 people were reported killed yesterday during those vicious IS assaults. Well, the Kurds tried to stop the Iraqi forces from coming in to help them in the Kurdish part of the city. In the town of Bashaka, which the Kurds failed to capture a few days ago, the Iraqis offered to come and help the Kurds. Again, the Kurds said no. And on a third front, there's a row still brewing between Turkey and Iraq. The Turks want to be involved in the Mosul offensive. The Iraqi government is still saying, no, this is not your business. And the American Defense Secretary Ash Carter flew to Baghdad today to try and sort this dispute out, and it seems that he hasn't succeeded.
Just on a smaller level, what do you know about this sulphur plant and the cloud that it produced?
Well, it's called the Mishrak sulphur plant. It's about 40 miles south of where I am now. A hospital down south of Mosul is saying that they have received almost 1,000 cases of people suffering from respiratory and inhalation problems. American troops who are based down there have started using masks for protection, and one Iraqi commander is quoted as saying that a couple of people have died of respiratory problems. And bear in mind that it will take 2 or 3 days, they're saying, to put the fire at this sulphur plant out. And you can see the damage and the fear that IS can cause by losing territory, but nevertheless causing a lot of trouble at the same time.
Thanks, Jonathan. Now, urgent diplomatic efforts are still going on to rescue a key trade deal between Canada and the European Union from collapse. Talks broke down yesterday after 7 years of negotiations after it was blocked by a Belgian regional parliament. Today, the European Parliament president said he was hopeful the objections could be resolved, but anti-Brexit campaigners said it showed the problems Britain could face once it has to negotiate its own trade relations. Theresa May's government is fanning the flames of xenophobia, according to the leader of the Welsh nationalists, Plaid Cymru. Liam Wood told delegates at the party conference a thuggish debate on immigration had fuelled a rise in hate crime, criticising society's lack of compassion.
Politicians are now openly fanning the flames, adding fuel to the fire of xenophobia instead of seeking to provide a lasting solution or to calm people's fears. We may have come to expect it from the likes of UKIP, but it has taken a dark turn when the UK Prime Minister joins in.
Sport, and England's cricketers have taken control of the first test against Bangladesh in Chittagong. The all-rounder Ben Stokes took 4 wickets as Bangladesh were bowled out for 248. England struggled in reply before Stokes and Johnny Bairstow rescued the innings with a partnership of 127. England finished the day on 228 for 8. That's a lead of 273. On to the football, and today's midday game saw 2 of the Premier League's informed sides, with Bournemouth taking on Tottenham. Both teams had their chances in the match, with Charlie Daniels coming close early on, but being denied by a brilliant save from Hugo Lloris. At the other end, Eric Lamela hit the bar for Spurs. The game finished 0-0, with Tottenham missing out on the chance to go top of the table. That Spurs draw means Liverpool have the chance of going top instead. They're currently playing West Brom in the late kick-off with 10 minutes left to play. Liverpool are currently 2-0 up. In today's other matches, Arsenal climbed to the top of the table for the time being after a goalless draw against Middlesbrough. Elsewhere, promoted side Burnley beat Everton. Stoke defeated Hull to move 2 points clear of the relegation zone. Hull drop into the bottom three. An injury-time goal gave West Ham victory over Sunderland. Leicester beat Crystal Palace. Swansea and Watford drew 0-0. We're back tomorrow at 6:30. Until then, from all of us here, that's Channel 4 News. Have a very good evening.